You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 537 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just wanted to thank you guys for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. That song you're hearing right now is, of course, Leave the Lights On from our good friends in Passafire. You can check those guys out anywhere you get your music. And the Rangers, just a couple of hours ago, wrapping up a pretty epic 2-1 victory against the Boston Bruins, a game that was decided in the 9th round of a shootout where K'Andre Miller scored the quote-unquote walk-off goal in the quote-unquote bottom of the 9th there. Just a outstanding finish to a tremendous hockey game, a game that, you know, I mean, there's so much to talk about here. It's hard to even know where to start. But this is the kind of game that, as recently as I think even a year ago, I'm not so sure that the Rangers could have played this type of a game against a team like the Boston Bruins and come away with it with 2 points. The Bruins, you know, they're always known for being a big team, a physical team, a team that tries to punk out the Rangers, quite frankly. You know, we've seen them in the past try to intimidate the Rangers a little bit. Maybe in the past it's worked to some degree. It certainly has not worked this season because the Rangers now 2-0 against the Boston Bruins. They won a relatively high-scoring game against the Bruins earlier this season, and now they win just a tough, blue-collar, grinded-out kind of a game. A lot of hitting, a lot of just stout defense being played both ways. The Rangers survive a lackluster first period in which they only got 2 shots on goal, but they obviously come storming back, and they end up out-shooting the Bruins 34-32 on the night. They also out-hit the Bruins 36-25. I mean, even out-hitting the Bruins, that in and of itself probably doesn't happen prior to this season, at least in recent history between these two teams. But I can't go a second further without talking about Igor Shesterkin and the borderline legendary performance that he had. I mean, the thing is, we've talked so many times on here about how Igor Shesterkin has had, you know, a tremendous game, and he stole the game, and he did this, and he did that, and I've had to go pretty deep into the bag of adjectives to describe how Igor Shesterkin has played in a lot of these games this season. But this game against the Bruins here, this one had a whole different layer to it because, you know, for anybody who watched this game, you probably already know what I'm talking about. Igor Shesterkin, the game goes into overtime, and, you know, a couple of chances both ways. It's anybody's game, you know, 3-on-3 overtime. It's a complete crapshoot. But there was an incident where he basically just got bowled over and went down to the ice, and Alexis Lafreniere, K'Andre Miller, Barclay Goodrow, they were all out there, and they jumped the player on the Bruins that, you know, knocked over Igor. And they ended up giving matching minors. You know, the Rangers and Bruins both get a minor penalty there. But Igor Shesterkin, you know, a couple more minutes go by. I think 2 more minutes went by in the overtime period. And then, and only then, did the NHL decide to call into, you know, the bench there and say that the Rangers had to remove Igor Shesterkin from this game to get checked out for a concussion. Now, first of all, let me just say, I understand where the NHL is coming from when it comes to head injuries and concussions. There's not really anything you can do about it. That's what Gerard Gallant, I think, was saying to his coaches on the bench. If the NHL makes that call and they think that somebody needs to be checked for a concussion, then so be it. I mean, those are the rules, and it probably should happen. Not only does it need to happen, it probably should happen because you can't be too careful when it comes to head injuries. But this also just kind of shines a light, I think, on the fact that the NHL's, you know, concussion protocol or whatever you want to call it is flawed because, again, 2 full minutes went by before that call was made and before somebody made the decision that Igor Shesterkin had to come out of that game. Somebody from the NHL made that decision, relayed it down to the Rangers. Jim Ramsey was on the ice, and you know, I realize part of it might be the fact that during a play stoppage, you know, Igor had some kind of weird facial twitches going on, but he does that quite a bit anyway. I think a lot of goalies do that. That's just kind of like a little tick that they do during a play stoppage. Every goalie's wired a little bit differently out there, but I've definitely seen Igor, you know, kind of do those weird face contortions or whatever you want to call it. But they make the call. Igor Shesterkin has to come out of the game. He's mad. He doesn't want to even hear about it when Jim Ramsey goes onto the ice. Not that he's mad at Ramsey. I mean, Ramsey's just doing his job, and he's done a great job as the Ranger trainer over the years. But Igor has to come out of the game, And, he's usually a pretty cool, calm, and collected goalie, but we saw some raw emotion come out of Igor Shesterkin there. He slams his stick against the boards on his way to the locker room, and I swear to God this is true. As this happened, and keep in mind, there's only 40 seconds left in the overtime period. Igor Shesterkin left the rink. He fist bumped with Alex Georgiev, who obviously had to come into the game. But at that very moment, swear to God, this was my first reaction. I said the Rangers should call their timeout right here and right now. I don't remember where the faceoff was at this point. I think it was actually forthcoming in the Bruins zone. But I said, you know what? Stall a little bit, because Igor can go in there, get checked for a concussion. He probably won't make it back out for any of the remaining 40 seconds of overtime, but you might be able to get him back out there for the shootout. That was the exact thought that went through my head there, and the Rangers didn't do that. There was, however, a play stoppage with, I believe, 6 or 7 seconds to go in the overtime period, and that's when the Rangers called the timeout. Now, of course, in that situation, look, you can't take that timeout with you. It doesn't carry into the next game, and you've got an offensive zone faceoff coming, so I'm sure the Rangers, regardless of anything going on with Igor Shesterkin, I'm sure that they wanted to, talk about what they want to do. If we win the faceoff, let's do this. If we lose the faceoff, let's try to get the puck back and do that. So I'm sure they want to talk strategy, but I think part of the idea there was also, let's drag this thing out as long as we possibly can and see if Igor Shesterkin can't get back out there for the shootout. And it's nothing against Alex Georgiev, but as we've talked about on here in the past, shootouts and breakaways in general tend to be something of an Achilles heel for Georgie. I don't think that's really unfair to say at this point. And you combine that with the fact that Georgie went into this game ice cold. And this was a crazy game. A lot of stuff happened both ways. And you've got an ice cold goalie going into the contest with just 40 seconds remaining. And in all likelihood, probably, going to have to be in the game for the shootout. But that was not the case. The Rangers get the game to the shootout, and then here comes Igor Shesterkin back onto the rink. The crowd is roaring and going absolutely wild. Loud chants of Igor. There were loud chants of Igor really throughout the night, but especially in the shootout here, especially in the 9th round of the shootout when, Igor, it was getting late. He had to make a save and set the stage for K-Andre Miller's heroics. But I did a video, a Locked On Now video. We do these from time to time at Locked On. It's basically just a rapid react video to whatever happens in your team's game as a host of one of these shows. And of course, I talked for about a minute and a half about the Rangers. But something I said in that video, and I'm honestly not even really kidding that much. I mean, maybe exaggerating just a little bit to make the point. But I said, when it's all said and done, many, many years from now, when Igor Shesterkin hangs up his skates and gets elected into the NHL Hall of Fame, which I think it's going to happen. I realize there's a long, long way to go, and he's got to have many, many more great seasons than he currently has under his belt, but I think that kind of potential exists for Igor Shesterkin. That's something I've been talking about for quite a while on here, and I really think that when, the time comes for him to enter the NHL Hall of Fame, and, you talk about some of his career highlights and some of his best moments and his biggest wins and his most unbelievable saves and all that good stuff, I really think that you're going to see this game against the Bruins as one of the earlier featured games in Igor Shesterkin's career highlight reel. Because, again, not only was he sensational in this game, he ends up stopping a total of 31 shots out of a possible 32. And, he had a save in this game where he had to do a split. It was just absolutely wild. He had a great save in the overtime period as well. He was fantastic. But again, this game had a whole extra layer of intrigue to it. The fact that he got knocked out of the game, came back out there like just a complete boss, steps back between the pipes, and then stops the Bruins on 7 out of their 9 shootout attempts, and the Rangers win the game. You can't really do much better than that. You can't really ask for much more than your goaltender than what Igor Shesterkin gave to the New York Rangers on this night here tonight at Madison Square Garden. So absolute kudos to Igor Shesterkin. We are really just getting rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. There's quite a bit more to talk about, as anybody who watched this game, or probably even if you didn't watch this game, you see the Rangers won 2-1 against a rival team in a 9-round shootout. You probably figure there's quite a bit to talk about here. Indeed, there is. And we're going to do that in just a second. But first, I just want to let everybody know today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Built Bar. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. And all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, Puffs included. 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They are better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to Built.com and scroll down to check out the macros chart. You will be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. At Built Bar, they are all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, just want to thank everybody once again for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Olympic Hockey Daily, presented by Locked On NHL, a bonus podcast covering all the action in Beijing. You can find it on the Locked On NHL podcast feed. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Somebody else that I think really deserves a shout-out in this game is Phillip Heatle. And again, I did that minute-and-a-half long Locked On Now video that I ended up posting to my Twitter account after the game ended a little bit earlier here tonight. But something else that I mentioned in that video is that Phillip Heatle, as much as maybe any player on the New York Rangers, he's a guy that just really kind of needed a moment. He needed to score a big-time goal, come up with a big-time assist, do something big in a tight game, in a big spot, in a clutch situation, and he did exactly that here tonight. The Rangers, through 2 periods for the most part, I thought, not by a dramatic amount, but I thought they at least slightly had the better of play overall. I thought more time was simply being spent on the Bruins side of the rink, at least after what was a little bit of a slow start by the Rangers, but that's to be expected. They've been off for a while. I mean, I understand that also means that they're fresh, but by that same token, they are a little bit rusty. They haven't really obviously played in any games recently, so you figure it might take them a little while to get going in this game. And it did, but, it goes into the third period, and you're still trailing in this game, and you're thinking, like, man, I feel like the Rangers have kind of outplayed them. And so you really want to get this game tied, at least get it into overtime, and then, take your chances on what is always a very unpredictable 3-on-3 overtime period, and then maybe even the shootout as well. And, of course, this one went to the shootout. But, man, Phillip Heatle coming up clutch about 6 minutes or so into the third period. We get Braden Schneider passing out of his own zone up to the blue line to Dryden Hunt. Hunt receives the pass right in front of the Bruins blue line. So he's still in the neutral zone. He's along the boards, and he's got his back turned to the blue line. And rather than, turn and try to carry the puck over himself, Hunt sees Phillip Heatle kind of streaking up the center of the ice there. We know how fast Heatle is. That's why I want him on the wing. I think he can better take advantage of his speed there. He was at center tonight, but be that as it may, Hunt passes to his right, because again, keep in mind, he's got his back turned to the blue line, and Heatle takes the pass in stride, goes to the net, takes a shot. Jeremy Swayman makes the save. Props to Jeremy Swayman, too. I mean, Igor Shesterkin was not the only goalie who was really sharp in this contest, quite the goalie duo, but he gives up the rebound here. Phillip Heatle finds it and buries it into the net, and just like that, we are tied at 1-1, and I swear to God, the first reaction that I had when I saw Phillip Heatle score this goal here, I said out loud, please tell me he was not offside, because it was close, and you saw the Bruins coaches were certainly taking a look at it on their bench there, looking at their iPads or whatever those devices are that they have on the benches there. But, replay showed Phillip Heatle, and props to Heatle, too. He had the wherewithal to, kind of drag his skate a little bit, make sure that he stayed onside, and then collect the puck, go in, and do what he did. I mean, his first shot was stopped, but followed up the play, buried his own rebound. So great job by Phillip Heatle staying onside there. Great job by Dryden Hunt getting in the puck, and a great pass by Braden Schneider from his own zone into the neutral zone to Hunt. Kind of got the whole ball rolling on that play. But that also kind of leads me in nicely to actually two players that I want to talk about here, that being Braden Schneider and Zach Jones. I thought both of them looked good in this game here tonight. They look comfortable. Zach Jones almost had the primary helper on what probably would have been the game-winning goal. Jones had the puck along the boards. He made a great centering pass to Alexis Lafreniere, who tipped it just wide. But, man, both these guys, to me, they look NHL ready, especially Schneider. I know Jones had a hiccup or two earlier in the season, but Schneider, I talked about this in a recent episode. I'll mention it again. This dude is never going back to the AHL. So if you're a fan of the Hartford Wolfpack, if you live in the Hartford area, I hope you enjoyed it while you could, getting to see him play live in your hometown there. But he's not going back. He's staying on the Rangers for the foreseeable future. As far as him being involved in a trade, I don't see it either. I think the Rangers collectively, and I realize, some of the guys who made that decision are no longer in the Ranger front office, but they love Braden Schneider, and they traded up to get him. They traded one spot in front of the New Jersey Devils in the draft to make sure they could get their guy, and that was Braden Schneider. And Schneider, he doesn't have any weaknesses, and when you watch him play, he just looks like somebody that belongs in the NHL. And I think everything I just said is true about Zach Jones to a lesser extent, and all this leads me into something else that I wanted to talk about, and that's Patrick Nemeth. But we'll get to Nemeth and a couple of other things in just a second. We'll break down that entire situation. Nemeth was not available for this game, but, the Rangers aren't really saying why. It's just a little bit of an odd situation. Like I said, we will get to that and a whole lot more in just a second. But first, just want to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline.net. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse just so happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you could possibly need. Brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts that your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, like I said just a second ago, wanted to go ahead and discuss the Patrick Nemeth situation here. He was obviously not in the lineup tonight. And we got a tweet here from our friend Vince Mercogliano. He was on the show not too long ago, just last week, in fact. Special two-part episode. Vince does a great job covering the Rangers. But this is what Vince tweeted out prior to the game here tonight. Gallant was asked if Nemeth isn't playing for physical reasons, personal reasons, or otherwise. And then Vince also includes a quote, from Gerard Gallant. We don't think he's ready yet. They just want to give him some more days. So that's a very vague, I don't want to say an elusive answer, but it's at least, if nothing else, it's kind of a perplexing answer. Because again, we've seen Nemeth in and out of the lineup this season, and, at first it was a non-COVID related illness, and then it was an injury, and then it was a personal matter, and now we don't really know why he's out of the lineup. I don't think they've really given us a reason. Supposedly, I think the reason, despite Gallant being kind of vague here, I think the given reason right now, it's tough to keep track of this, but I think the given reason from the Rangers right now is that he is injured. And if that's the case, then so be it. But I am starting to, wonder a little bit here. First of all, again, I think I'm stating the obvious here, but let's all just keep our fingers crossed and hope that everything is going okay with Patrick Nemeth away from the ice. He doesn't have any kind of a serious issue or nothing's happening with his family or anything of that nature. I think that's pretty much common sense that we all feel that way. But if it's not any of that kind of stuff and he's being held out and we don't really know why, I'm almost wondering if the Rangers are getting to the point where, they look at Braden Schneider and they look at Zach Jones and to a lesser extent, maybe even guys like, Nils Lundqvist, he's back in the AHL. And then also Libor Hayek has played a handful of games for the Rangers this season. I'm wondering if it's at the point where the Rangers don't look at their depth chart and say, We tried with Nemeth. He was brought in to be, you know, the steady, stable veteran, but we have too many defensemen that are just quite simply better options than Patrick Nemeth right now. And I'm not even sure, I don't think they would be wrong if they felt that way. And, you know, obviously guys like Lundqvist and Zach Jones and Braden Schneider, all those guys have much higher long-term upside than Patrick Nemeth. I don't think Nemeth is going to, like, you know, he's 29 now. I don't think he's going to come back and have a career season. I don't think he'll have a career season next year or the year after that. It's not just that, though. It's not just the fact that all those aforementioned Ranger defensemen have more upside than Nemeth. It's the fact that I think they're better players than he is right now. And, you know, I know some people are going to, you know, point to Zach Jones' lack of size and say, well, you know, playoff time, you know, he could get pushed around a little bit. You know what? If that happens, I'm almost at the point where I say so be it. Because if you look at the rest of the Ranger defensemen, you know, we've been talking on here about how I think the Ranger top 4 defensemen, it's as good as just about any quartet of defensemen that any team has in this league. We're almost getting to the point, and again, I don't want to jump the gun here because I know he's only played, I think this is his 11th game tonight, but if you want to include Braden Schneider in that group of defensemen and you want to stretch it out from a quartet to a quintet, I think you could make the case that, you know, the Rangers have 5 defensemen that could stack up against any other 5 defensemen in hockey. So if the only spot left is going to be filled by a young, high-upside player who's a little bit of an offense-first defenseman and, you know, maybe a little bit undersized, so be it, man. I'll take my chances with it. You can, I mean, you can't hide anybody, you know, in your NHL roster, anybody who's dressed on any given night. This isn't, you know, other sports where, you know, certain players just ride the bench the entire game. Anybody who's dressed is going to play. But I think you can get by with, you know, Zach Jones playing a decent amount of minutes, but not a crazy amount of minutes, even like in postseason competition. We'll see. And obviously, the way that these final 34 games of the season go are going to dictate how the Rangers approach the playoffs. But I think it's at least possible now. We got to talk about the idea that the sun could kind of be setting on Patrick Nemeth and, you know, his run with the New York Rangers here. And I'm almost wondering if they're at a situation here where the Rangers could do something where, you know, they strike a trade later this season, you know, prior to the trade deadline, and they include Patrick Nemeth in a trade with a non-contending team and basically do it as a way to alleviate themselves from Nemeth's contract, because he's got 2 more years on his contract left after this. We'll see how the Rangers look to approach that, but I could see a deal like that potentially happening. But I do want to kind of shift our attention back to tonight's game here because, you know, we've talked about some of the biggest highlights and, you know, some of the players who really stood out in positive ways for the New York Rangers, but there are a couple other things that I want to go over. Again, you know, the crazy 9-round shootout. And I mentioned that Miller scored. I might as well go ahead and just kind of take you through everything that he did on this shootout attempt here. It's the first attempt of his career, and you wouldn't know it from watching this. He had some nasty moves. He kind of dropped his shoulder on the way in. He faked going to his backhand, brought it back to his forehand, and there was a small opening between Swayman's outstretched right pad and the post, and Miller was able to stuff it home, and that gave the Rangers the win. But I think we also have to marvel at the goals scored by both Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad went first for the Rangers. DeBrusk had already scored in the quote-unquote top of the first for the Bruins, so Rangers are already down 1-0. But Mika is 25 for 58 in his career, so flirting with the 50% success rate on the shootout, which is just a crazy percentage to even be near. But he goes in slow, basically just fakes Swayman out of his skates, moves across the crease, tucks it home. He faked going to his backhand, and it worked brilliantly. And then Pastrnak does not score for the Bruins. Igor Shesterkin with the save there. But then Panarin, the second shooter for the Rangers, it was just ridiculous. He goes in so slow. He went wide up the left side, stick handles a bunch, you know, in front of the net. Finally just, you know, pulls it to his backhand and tucks it home. You know, Strome and him were celebrating on the bench. Strome almost kind of had Panarin in a headlock. I think even Strome every now and then is amazed by some of the things that Artemi Panarin does on the ice. And he's been playing with him for 2.5 seasons now on the same line. But just really cool to see. I mean, Panarin, just a human cheat code. And honestly, if you happen to miss this game tonight, first of all, I'm sorry because it was a fantastic win for the Rangers. But secondly, get yourself to a screen right now and watch the shootout and specifically watch Artemi Panarin, because no words I say are going to justify just how nasty this was and just how special of a player he really is. Just pulling off moves like that and just, you know, beating a goalie who had his A game tonight and beating him pretty convincingly as well. It's also very easy to forget. When you watch your team play in any kind of shootout, really, but especially one that goes 9 rounds and they end up winning, and, as a Ranger fan, you're basically living and dying with every shootout attempt by both the Rangers and the Bruins, and, you're at the edge of your seat, quite literally, and, yelling at the TV and doing whatever you're doing. By the time all the dust settles on a 9-round shootout in which your team gets the win, you might not remember everything that happened in the overtime. And honestly, if I wasn't taking notes, I'm not sure I'd be able to really remember a whole lot. One thing I definitely would have remembered, though, was just a ridiculous save by Igor Shesterkin. I mean, how many times have I said that? But again, it's the truth. It really was a ridiculous save. But, Hall and Pastrnak are going in on a 2-on-1, and Igor moves to his left. He basically dives across the goal crease. Hall passed to his right to Pastrnak. This had game-winning goal written all over it, but you know what? The New York Rangers have Igor Shesterkin. There's no other goalie that I'd rather have in this league, on this planet, and Igor lays out to his left and makes the save. Play continues, and Strome passes way up the ice to Artemi Panarin to spring him on a breakaway. Panarin went in, and he was stopped by Swayman, so the game continues. And then we had that situation where Igor was crashed into by Craig Smith of the Bruins. And again, great job by Lafreniere and Miller and Goodrow getting in there, getting him out of there. I mean, Lafreniere took a penalty, so I don't know. I mean, there's part of me that wishes, okay, maybe just try to stay cool and don't take that penalty, and now you've got a power play in overtime. But by the same token, you got to protect your goalie, especially Igor Shesterkin, who has had some injuries, thus far in his young NHL career. So I can't get too mad at Lafreniere for that. But both guys go to the penalty box, and you continue to skate 3-on-3 anyway, because those are the rules of overtime. I also got to call some attention to a play made by Jacob Trouba in the overtime period as well. He was basically one-on-one with Pastrnak. Pastrnak entered the Rangers zone with a good amount of speed, and Trouba just stays with him and just checks him and knocks him down to the ice and takes the puck away from him. And I know I've asked this question on this podcast in the past as well, but are there seriously any Ranger fans that still are holding out on Jacob Trouba? Look, I know he'll have a miscue every now and then. He's not perfect, but this guy, he plays his heart out every single game for this team. By all accounts, he's really stepped up as a leader in the locker room. He was mixing it up, almost got into a fight earlier tonight. Just another strong overall game for Jacob Trouba. And again, somebody that, to me, shows up to play every single time the New York Rangers are in action. And that's got to count for something. And a big play here, knocking down Pastrnak. And in fact, earlier in this game, Igor Shesterkin came way out of his crease to play the puck, and Pastrnak was moving in, and Pastrnak kind of, knocked Igor down to the ice, and the Ranger bench was yelling about that. There was nothing called on the play. Pastrnak ended up taking a hit from Ryan Reeves just after that. Reeves, by the way, ends up with a game-high 8 hits in this game, because of course he does. I mean, what else would you even expect at this point? And there was one other sequence that I wanted to talk about in this game, and I feel like, this was a game, again, so much happened. There's so many different angles to look at this from, but there was a sequence in the first period that I thought really kind of got the Rangers rolling a little bit. Now, they were already down 1-0 at this point, but there was, again, a sequence where all 4 Ranger lines, one after the next, all had what I thought were pretty good shifts. You had a really good shift by the Phillip Heatle line, moving the puck around in the Bruins zone and looking for the equalizer. Again, this is all happening in the first period, but you had Heatle and Gauthier and Dryden Hunt out there. Some good passing. Zach Jones and Braden Schneider were out there as well. All 5 guys touching the puck, working hard. Couldn't get a shot on net because Boston was defending very well, especially at this point in the game, but sustained pressure in the Boston zone for the first time in this game. Like I said, it's unfortunate that they couldn't get a shot on the net, couldn't score a goal. That would be even better. But I thought this shift got the crowd back into it a little bit, kind of woke up the Madison Square Garden faithful, and then you had the 4th line out there, and Reeves on this shift got a shot on goal. It was the Rangers' first shot on goal of the night, 12 minutes and 15 seconds into the game. And as we've talked about on here, I need to see the Rangers start putting the puck at the net a little bit more often. We'll give them a little bit of a break because, again, they were kind of rusty tonight. The Bruins were playing great defense. They had to kind of find their legs and find their A game and all that good stuff. But it took 12 minutes and 15 seconds to register a shot on goal. But regardless, a strong shift by that 4th line there. And then the Rangers, You know, they're starting to find that next gear, and the Panarin line comes out, and they look really dangerous. You get Fox taking a shot from the blue line. Swayman got just enough of it to send it wide. And then the Mika line came out there, you know, Kreider and Lafreniere, and the three of them forced the Bruins to take an icing. So all four lines, one right after the next, all have a strong shift for the Rangers here in this sequence. I thought that was really, really cool to see, and that's when the Rangers started to find it a little bit. They start to kind of, feed off of each other, feed off of the crowd a little bit. That's when it started looking like, okay, these are the New York Rangers of 2021, 2022 that we all know and love. And indeed, they started playing better almost immediately after this sequence. So that was great to see there. Again, all four lines, one right after the next. There were no play stoppages throughout any of this. The Bruins took an icing at the very end of it, but one line after the next went out there and just continued to almost like pass the baton. You know, we had a great shift. Now you have a great shift. Now you have a great shift. Now you have a great shift. It was really awesome and something that could very easily get overlooked. But I think it's, again, a big spot in this game that once again got the Rangers to kind of rediscover their A game after what was a slow start. And again, I apologize if there's anything else that I missed from this game. But again, it was a wild game. There was just a ton to talk about. And the Rangers come away with one of their most satisfying and most exciting wins of the season, taking down the Boston Bruins 2-1 in their first game back after the All-Star break. And that will pretty much do it for today. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets.